Stick. Oh! Heat him up! Make him hard! Ready! Let's show this prehistoric bitch how we do things downtown.
Hi, this is me Geek and I'm Dan, and in this week's video, lasers, but also shop tidying and stuff and updates. So I just took 2 weeks off work, and whenever I take that much time off to basically be at home and do things, I say to myself, you've got so much time. Think of all the projects that you can do. Think of all the videos you can make. And what actually happens is this kind of devastation. I got involved in a house project. Every year I essentially take that 2 weeks off to redecorate another room in the house. This year was the turn of the hallway. I didn't video it because there's no way I know of to make stripping wallpaper and painting interesting to look at. I did lay the floor. That would have been maybe slightly interesting, but all I have for you is finished shots. Rest assured though, that all went well. I now have like 2 days left before I have to go back to work, and my workshop is a disaster. So I also need to tidy this mess. I don't know why. Like, I think when I get involved in a project like the house, like everything else just goes to hell. It's just like grab what you need and go, and so everything is covered in sawdust and piled on top of each other. And anyone fancy coming and cleaning my workshop for me? No? No takers? No takers? Well, I wish I was on your side of the camera, because on your side of the camera it gets clean when I do this. Ta-da! Well, I say clean, I mean cleaner, clean enough to get on. Get to the laser! Yeah, I'm getting to it. We'll get there. Don't worry, we'll get there. So get on with stuff. So let's get on with stuff. What's been going on? What order am I going to do this in? So I have the laser. The laser is cool. We're going to see the laser. We're going to cut some stuff on the laser. I'm going to talk about the laser. First things first, I want to talk about this. This is a pocket armour by Popov leather. They sent one to me to try one out. I wasn't sure what to expect. Turns out that it fits my Mega knife like perfectly. They're practically made for each other. Like, the fit is snug and awesome. I like this because I'm a clumsy person and will drop this and I want to protect my my number 12 Mega knife. It does limit a little bit the one-handedness of this. That, like, if you have it clipped on a belt, the ability to grab it off and use it. But I have already dropped this and had it knocked out of my pocket and various things, so I quite like having it in this protector, and I really want to get a pen to go with the pen loop. And I say get a pen, I'm probably going to make a pen or a pencil. That's probably a future project. I have this one, which I thought would be perfect, but it has these ridges on it, which mean it catches the elastic. So watch this space. So far, pretty happy. Popov leather. Cool, nice material. I may have to try throwing this in the laser when I get a bit more confident with the materials. That's got to be a thing to try. So thank you, Mr. Popov, Ryan, in fact, Ryan, cheers. I'm really digging it. Right, what else do I have to say before we get to the laser? The Evolution chop saw. Just an update really. I used this a bunch whilst I was doing DIY in the house. I made a load of cuts for the flooring. I bought solid oak flooring. It made a beautiful job of the cuts, no splintering out, which made that much nicer. I did also use it to cut a 45-degree chamfer on some pieces where I was blending in the threshold to another room. So, slight confession, I flipped this thing over to 45 degrees, which is very easy to do. So it flips over to 45 degrees really easy. I knew that's what I was going to do. And from here, what you can't see is the fence. Now it's an adjustable fence so that you can sort of slide this out of the way when you're doing a 45-degree cut. Problem is, you see, the blade on this is so good that I cut clean through my solid oak flooring and clean through the fence without even noticing. Like, I literally, the only thing was that when I finished, I was like, oh, it's kind of a clean, shiny surface that I don't think was there before. I don't even know where the bit went. Sorry, evolution. It's very nice. Works fine anyway. Okay, enough of the random updates. Time for the laser. So what we have here is a k40 laser. If you're watching this video because I tagged it k40, you've probably seen millions of videos exactly like this. It is, from what I can tell, basically the cheapest CO2 laser unit that you can get. It seems to have a pretty good community behind it. I was introduced to it by Wes Swain of Geeksmithing. He was doing some pretty cool stuff, and on kind of his recommendation, I thought it was worth to give it a go. So I have mine in the corner. The first most kind of, I want to say tricky, but like unlike other tools, there are a few key things that you have to do to set it up. In this case, you need water cooling, so I had to run some pipes through the workbench down to the floor where there is a bucket of coolant and a pump. That's to cool the CO2 tube. If you don't do that, then you destroy your CO2 tube pretty quickly. The other thing is extraction. When you are vaporizing stuff with a laser, you pretty much don't want to inhale it. There are a few things you don't want to do at all because you run the risk of killing yourself. And so the advice that I'm sticking to is don't try to laser anything that you haven't seen people say is safe to laser. But anyway, regardless, even lasering wood and such, there is dust and fumes and soot and such to be extracted. Following again the advice of Mr. Swain, I took the extractor that it came with and threw it in the trash. It had a very, very low airflow rate, didn't really fit very well. So the first thing I did really was 3D print an adapter for the back, run a standard hose, a fairly beefy shower extractor, runs reasonably quiet, and obviously I also had to drill a great big hole in the side of my garage to extract the fumes outside. But with that set up, you're then basically ready to roll, and it's a pretty damn fun machine to play with. The other thing I did is take out the standard base. Again, pretty much what every video about the k40 tends to say is that this thing is kind of flaky to use. You can't use the whole base. I mean, I guess it is a good starter for 10. It gives you a good idea of what height you need things to be at. So I'll talk a little bit about what I've done to adapt this in that regard. And of course, the other thing that is an enhancement that a lot of people do, which I figured I might as well do straight away, is air assist. Air assist is basically just blowing compressed air right at the path of the beam to try and blow any soot and debris away, and specifically keep all of that dust and soot away from the lens, just to prolong the life of everything before you have to clean it. One adjustment I've made is that I have this metal plate to make the bed, and I 3D printed these covers for the original bed's metal standoff pins. So those screws just fit right over the top of those standoff pins, and then they have little adjustable nuts that you can twist up and down, and I actually laser cut these cross beams so that raises the whole thing. Now, it is fiddly. It's not the nicest setup I've seen, but it was really, really easy to do. Didn't take long to 3D print those parts, and it does mean that I have good adjustability, so I can set my work. I try and keep it pretty much in line with the bottom of the vent here. So here I've got a chunk of offcut chunk of the flooring that I just fit in my hallway. I'm just going to try and laser a logo on the top for my brother's building company. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to turn on the air assist. That's going to blow air down both through here and through here. I'm going to run this at about 20% and we'll see how it comes out. Let's just set the focus there. Close the window. Just get ourselves lined up. That's a good enough place to start. Engage the laser. Turn on the air assist.
I think that's can be a lot of fun. It can also be a huge waste of time. I mean, sometimes you can get down a far path and you're like,
I always disengage the laser when I open the thing, just to be on the safe side. But that is basically what you get right off the laser. So you can see there's some soot and such from the process. But man, that's still so impressive. That's one pass, just raster. It's about maybe a mil deep. Pretty cool. This is the software that makes the laser run, or at least the one that basically everyone uses. I again took the advice of anyone I could find and didn't even try installing the software that came with the machine. This is K40 Whisperer. If you Google for it, you'll find it. It basically makes a pretty nice interface. It takes, at its heart, SVG files, scalable vector graphics. I use Inkscape to produce them, and it produces a nice way to interpret those as G-code simply. So basically, if you make something black, then you press the raster engrave button, it will pick out all the things that are black, and it will basically use an algorithm much like a regular printer, and just sort of sweep the pixels of all of those black dots across. If you make it blue and hit vector engrave, it will move along the paths of your lines at the speed specified, and you can change these. In fact, I think by default the recommendation is like 20 millimeters a second for vector, 10 for vector cut. There's no real difference between blue and red in terms of the path that it generates. It's literally just how fast it chooses to move, and obviously at a given power of laser, if you're going slower, you're going to cut deeper. I'm going to try another raster right now. I need to flip this because I'm going to raster on the back of a piece of acrylic, and I want it to look correct through the other side. So let's just quickly open up Inkscape. Let's grab this guy, get rid of that for a second. Let's just flip our image and save it as reversed. So we'll open up our design file, reversed. So again, simple, this is black text, and we're going to hit raster, and off we go. Now, raster engraving is cool and everything, but what we really want to see, obviously, is a laser cutter to cut things. So, I've added a red box around the logo, and let's get that thing cut out. So this is actually a particular type of acrylic designed for being laser cut. the stuff you buy at B&Q is not it. That stuff just melts, whereas this vaporizes and leaves these really lovely clean edges right off the laser. Try and get that to focus, which is tricky. So I lasered my pattern onto the back side. It does mark it on the stickers do sort of say the face side versus the back side. So hopefully that's all cleaned out nicely, and then with any luck I just there you go. Well, clearly there's a limit to how interesting it is watching a robot moving in 2 dimensions. I mean, it's cool, but it's not that cool. So the real question is, what can you cut with it, or indeed engrave with it? What materials? So let's take a look at the materials that I have tested so far. We'll start at the easy end, paper, at less than 10% power. Like this top line is a little scorched. That was about 10 or 11% power. This bottom line looks like it hasn't all the way cut through, but actually all of these are literally barely hanging on. I can kind of poke them out of the way. That was about, I think, 7.5%. So you can do fairly delicate cuts with paper. What I did notice on more complex designs, if it's doing a lot of tight detail in a single area, you're kind of putting a lot of heat into a small space on the paper, and so you can burn it at that point, even though it's kind of fine in other places. Once it gets into tiny details, you can cause too much localized heating, but paper's pretty cool. Next step up, cardboard. This is really good. Obviously paper, cardboard, very easy to come by. Stuff arrives in packages full of this stuff, and this is pretty cool, I think, for making stencils, which I've played with a little bit. And again, this cuts really nicely. You just need to make sure you get the focal depth right so that it's cutting all the way through. So those are pretty cool, interesting. Then we get into wood. I've played around with this stuff. This is like a pretty standard hardboard. I think this came from the back of a piece of furniture. Couple of passes. Again, once you're at the right height, it's quite sensitive to exactly the right height, but at the right height, 2 passes, it'll cut all the way through this, which is, I guess, 3mm hardboard. And again, good for stencils, and I guess for parts making. I haven't made any parts that need to interlock with themselves yet. That'll be a future video, because I guess once you're interlocking, you have to account for any kind of kerf that the laser leaves or cuts away. The most detailed thing in wood that I have cut is this little interesting thing. This was not my design, I just found something of it, so I'm really interested by these living hinges. This was pretty dicey, again, because such fine detail, you're close to setting fire to the thin pieces of wood left. But that just about came out okay. I needed to do quite a lot of sanding to get all the way through, because I was worried about running another pass and it burning, but that's pretty interesting. Solid oak. This is an engraving, obviously. I did try cutting through this. I got about halfway, I think, through. I don't know whether adjusting the depth of this would have helped, but I think at some point you kind of have so much of the trough for the laser to go through, you kind of cause, I guess, some diffraction that makes it difficult. What I have noticed in engraving oak in particular, you get some fairly striated sections removed, because the I guess the heartwood and the sapwood and the growth ring kind of, you've got in wood essentially bits that are stronger and softer. That obviously reacts the same to a laser, and it gets rid of them at slightly different rates. And so I think slightly denser woods with less apparent grain laser more evenly. What I will say, which is pretty cool, when you do get one that kind of lasers quite nicely, you get this wonderful benefit that you kind of keep the grain look beneath. Like, you get that texture, which is pretty sweet. This was just a simple Star Wars image I pulled off of the internet just to try it out. Pretty easy to poke that through Inkscape and into K40 Whisperer to do the business. So this, obviously, as I say, was a more dense piece of wood. This one I actually did essentially a reverse engrave. So I obliterated everything that wasn't the pattern, and I flipped the image so that this can be used as a stamp. So you just clamp it with some kind of tough rubber backing and put paper or leather in between, and you can leave an embossing, which is pretty sweet. So that brings us on to leather. Obviously you can emboss leather, having made the mug, but you can also cut it directly. This was a raster. It's actually removed, I would say, maybe 25% of the thickness of the leather there. That's left a really nice clean cut. I haven't spent too much time trying to cut leather all the way through, but that is a future thing. I made this wallet a while ago, and I just sort of hand cut it out. Intentionally, this was sort of a prototype. I kind of would like to CAD this whole design up and see whether I can cut out the main shapes on the laser to get nice perfect cutouts. We'll see whether that works, but it engraves nicely, and you can get some kind of cool patterns, which I'm very pleased with. That then brings us to acrylic, which I have been playing with. As I mentioned earlier, acrylic comes in two different types, or I guess it probably comes in many different types, but you kind of need acrylic specific for laser cutters. I did have some acrylic laying around that I had bought for a project years ago, which I thought might work, but it kind of melts rather than cuts. And the two things we can do with acrylic, one is beautifully etch the backside to create these really nice, clean looking signs. I guess a lot of people do these. They put LEDs beneath them to light them up. That is super cool looking. And then because it cuts in nicely, you can also cut out. So let's see if I can poke these out. So I cut out the whole pattern in a piece of acrylic, and it literally leaves behind the pieces so cleanly that they fit back in like a puzzle. So that is a very, very cool material to use. What it won't do, metal, basically. If you want to cut metal or do anything particularly interesting to metal, 40 watts is not enough power. What you can do is, I guess, cut off the coating, like I guess if it's painted. I think there are some materials that you can buy that you paint on and etch away. Anodized aluminium, you can take off the anodized coating. I did that to a cheap knife. Interestingly, to my sort of eye, multiple surfaces of this, they obviously look the same, they've been coated in something similar, but it barely touches these panels, but it does a fairly nice job on this edge. And just as a quick interesting test today, I also engraved on a Coke can. You can just, if you catch it in the right light, it looks pretty sweet, but it's literally all you've done is burning off whatever this coating is on top of the aluminium. You're not making a dent at all in the metal because the metal just takes the heat away way too quickly. So there you go, that is a range of materials that I have so far played with my K40 laser. It's pretty fast. I guess that's the other thing, like compared to the 3D printer. I mean, obviously the 3D printer is doing a lot more volume stuff, but like we're talking of the order of 10 to 20 minutes to do a lot of these things each, whereas there is not a great deal you can do on a 3D printer in 10 to 20 minutes. Similarly, the CNC machine obviously has more scope in some regards, but like it's fast, it's quiet, so for certain types of work, very, very capable machine for a pretty reasonable price. So there you go, my evil lair now has a laser. So anyone know where you can buy some shot? And that's it. If you made it this far, you've tolerated some fairly poor lighting and probably some pretty awful audio. Sorry, kind of slightly out of practice, and I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to put in this. Anyway, next week I'm going to be at Maker Central. Maybe you will be too. Come and find me. I will be wearing a bright yellow t-shirt with Make a Geek written on it, so that people don't mistake me for someone else. I don't know. It'd be cool to say hello to anyone that wants to say hey. I know I've got a load of people that I would like to meet. Hopefully it'll be a good time. See you in Birmingham.